All right, welcome back. A very sad weekend. Joining us now is Trooper Ross Brennan with the Louisiana State Police. And Trooper Brennan, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How about you?
I tell you, I was trying to recollect, but never have I sat on this news desk in all these years and talked about 9 fatalities in one weekend or 1 week. But if you go back to the 13th, 11
Yes, sir.
total.
Yeah. So you go back to the 13th, it's actually 11, which, I mean, that's a little bit over a week.
Yeah.
And in my time at the troop, I've never seen that many people. And just talking to some of the old timers, they haven't seen that many people. So it was definitely a tragic last couple of days in our area down here.
Yeah, let's talk about these fatalities because we're getting very close to the holidays.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed that it won't rise from that point. But can you bring us through them if you could?
Yeah. So the first one that occurred on the 13th, that was near Port Fourchon, LA1. For reasons still in their investigation, a female driver, she crossed the center line and she hit head on with another vehicle. And unfortunately, she did lose her life. A little bit later on the next day, there was a crash that occurred on LA20 in the Schriever area. A driver crossed center line and he struck another vehicle head on. The passenger in the vehicle that was struck ended up passing away, but that driver in that vehicle, so the driver 2 in that crash, that driver was arrested for DWI, even though he in terms didn't cause the crash because he was driver 2. But there was an impaired driver in that crash. And unfortunately, just over this past weekend, we lost 7 people in basically one night between Friday, Saturday night. I mean, that's horrible in and of itself. So the first one that happened late Friday evening around 8, Charles Triggs was traveling on LA 182 and was seen to determine probably impairment and reckless driving. He was trying to pass another vehicle at a high rate of speed in a no passing zone, and unfortunately he struck head on with another vehicle, a Honda, that was being driven by Ariana Lachico of the area. And unfortunately, Miss Ariana, she passed away in that crash, and also Mr. Triggs and the 2 occupants inside of his vehicle, they also passed away in that crash. And like I said, we believe that impairment was involved in that one. And then a little bit later on the night, around midnight, there was another fatal crash that occurred in Lafourche Parish on LA 20 in the Chack Bay area. Joey Claymont was traveling northbound on LA 20 and he crossed the center line, and unfortunately he struck a vehicle that was full of 3 teenage girls in a Mazda SUV, and they were all Nichols students, young. And unfortunately after that crash, the vehicles became engulfed in flames, and Mr. Claymont, he was able to get out the vehicle with minor injuries, but due to the injuries and severity of the crash, the other occupants inside those 3 teenage girls, they weren't able to get out, and they passed away at the scene due to their injuries.
Is Mr. Claymore, he had several DWIs prior, right?
Yeah, so he had multiple DWIs. He was arrested for his 4th offense in this case. He was also charged with 3 counts of vehicular homicide and also not wearing a seatbelt and crossing the center line. And so currently he is sitting at the Lafourche Parish Jail with a $1.5 million bond right now.
What does that do to you as a trooper when y'all put so much effort into getting people the message? But you can only put the message out. They've got to absorb it. They've got to make sure that they listen to it. But it just seems some people get it, some people don't get it.
You know, we can go out there and preach the message and do enforcement, but I mean, it's a community-wide effort in a lot of these cases. You know, we need drivers to make good decisions behind the wheel. Don't drive distracted. Put that cell phone away. Don't let different things take your eyes away from the road. Wear that seatbelt. And when you wear your seatbelt just in the crash, your chances of surviving go over 50%. And then a lot of cases, especially over the weekend, impaired driving. I mean, before you even get on the highway, or especially with the holidays and different things like that coming up, people are going to be out drinking, having parties, different things like that. So before you even leave to go to these events, have another plan in place, a designated driver, rideshare apps. We have Uber, we have Lyft in the area, we have taxis. Try to plan something before you even go, because you don't want to find yourself towards the end of the night trying to figure out how you're going to get home if you have a couple, right? That's not the time to be thinking about what you're going to do. So, I mean, especially designated drivers, come up with some type of plan before you even go, because we want to avoid these tragic situations. I mean, ultimately somebody has to make that decision to get behind the wheel, and we can be out there enforcing and educating people, but it ultimately comes down to that driver having to make a choice, and we need everybody to make the good choice to avoid these situations.
What happens at the troop when obviously, y'all human too. I mean, and when you get this amount of fatalities, I'm sure as a trooper, you go back into Troop C and everybody goes, whoa.
Yeah.
What does that do to y'all as a entire unit at that point?
So it definitely was a talk of conversation today around the troop, and I feel like a lot of people's spirits were down, especially when so many people killed and so many young people that were taken away in basically preventable crashes. And it definitely affects first responders too. I mean, they're out there seeing it firsthand. I mean, you're at the crash scene, seeing the victims and everything else involved in it. So in addition to the family and loved ones of that person, I mean, first responder, it takes a toll on them having to see that. And some situations, it might be that person's only time they ever experience that, but first responders, they see that multiple times a year, throughout their whole career and different things. So it's definitely over time it plays a toll.
It makes it so sad. Not that it's not sad any night of the week, but when you get to the holidays, it
Yes,
makes it
exactly.
that much tougher, doesn't it?
Yep, for sure. Especially so close to holidays, people are going to be out celebrating between Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. Well, now, unfortunately, these families, they're going to have an empty table at the seat, or that person's not going to be around for the holidays. So it's definitely going to be a lifelong remembrance every time this time of the year pops up.
Right. We've done so many shows with the Domino Effect that Cam Morvant, the DA of Lafourche, started years ago. Miss Christine Russell kept it going. COVID got in the way the last few years. And Terrebonne General's done shows. But the person's got to absorb it.
Yeah.
They got to make sure they think it'll never happen to them.
Yeah.
But it does,
It
doesn't
does. Yeah. Trauma is anybody's game. It doesn't, typically people think trauma is old person. They might have maybe heart failure or diabetes, but it can happen at any age. And what we're seeing a lot of times in these car crashes is traumatic events, severe broken bones, injuries, all the way up to fatalities. The main thing with crashes are they're preventable. Basically, somebody did something behind the wheel that they shouldn't have done, whether that's driving distracted or driving impaired or even not wearing a seatbelt and causing more injury than what should have been there. So basically, people have to make a choice when they're behind the wheel. I mean, we talked about impaired driving with these last crashes that happened over the weekend, but distracted driving, that's a major issue down here. Most of our crashes that we work are small rear-ender crashes in our Troop C area, and that's because people are driving distracted, they're not paying attention, they don't realize that the car has come to a stop in front of them, and they bump bumpers. It might not be that much injury or damage, but it still is considered a crash. But even more so, I mean, we've seen crashes where people cross center line because they were distracted and either severe injuries or fatalities just based off that.
And that brings me to this. I'm driving, got my
Yeah.
cell phone. So if you put your cell phone up, you got your hand on the left wheel, and somebody asks you a question and you thumbing it and answering it.
Yeah.
What's the average time it takes somebody to do this, and how far do they travel?
So on average, the normal text takes about 4 seconds. By the time you look at it, read it, and maybe put the phone down, it's about 4 seconds. Well, if you're traveling at 55 miles an hour, you just went a distance of a football field in that time that you just looked at that text message. And a lot can happen within the football field. That's a car coming to a stop in front of you. It's a light changing. It's maybe a school bus stopping and letting kids off. That might even be a kid running out after a toy. They might be young enough or not to know that not chase after the toy. Right. So a lot can happen. But if you're so distracted, it's like driving with a blindfold on. So whenever you're behind that wheel, you want to set yourself up for success and drive paying attention behind the wheel, and also drive defensively, especially now. I mean, we have so much traffic in our area since the hurricane. We got displaced people moved up to Bayou. We got contractors in here. We got utility workers, different things like that. So we have all this traffic on the highway. Our crash volume compared to last year is through the roof just because we have so many people on our roads. And that's people that are driving, a lot of times they're driving recklessly. They might be running red lights. They might be slamming on their brakes. They might be trying to pass and maybe not in the right place they should be, or speeding. So whenever you drive behind the wheel, especially right now, drive defensively. Always kind of expect other people to mess up. Scan outside your vehicle, look for potential hazards. Maybe see that light. Well, that light's been green for a while. It's probably going to change to yellow soon, and it's probably going to then change to red. So if you're already thinking about stuff like that before it even happens, when it does happen, you're already able to respond to it. By the time you see a hazard, it goes through your brain, down your leg, to maybe move your foot from the gas to the brake, or move your arms, different things like that. It takes a couple seconds, about second and a half, 2 seconds for that to happen. So if you're already prepared to react to something by scanning, looking at potential hazards on the roadway, then something does happen, you're able to respond to it quickly enough, probably avoid a crash, or maybe if y'all do collide, it wouldn't be as severe because you took an appropriate action.
You know, there's a couple of spots, we all know spots in our parish, or in Lafourche, or St. Mary, wherever you're watching that, maybe a building blocking your
Yeah.
line of sight, and you're watching that light, and when it turns green in your end, you want to go.
Yeah.
I always count it at 2 count, 1 1,000,
Yeah.
2 1,000, then I go, because somebody on that other blind side may be running that light.
Yeah, it's always best just don't always go right when the light turns green because, like we said, distracted drivers, if they're so encompassed on their phone or something inside the vehicle, they're not even realizing the light changed red. It's always, like you said, it's always best to wait a few seconds and then go. Just to make sure that everybody's coming to a stop and everybody pays attention, whether that's a red light, stop sign, intersections, different things like that.
I wanted to, at the last couple of minutes, there were 3 troopers that retired from Troop C, and I wanted to give them a little shout out for their service, and I'll let you handle that.
For sure. So Lieutenant Jody Blanchard, Lieutenant Matt Trahan, and Sergeant Travis Columbell. There's a lot of people in the community that know them. You know them as well. They did just retire. They had a lot of years they dedicated to the state police, and I do wish them well in their retirement. It's definitely well due. And they were a big asset to the Troop C area. We're advocates for a lot of different things. We're involved in many different coalitions, safety boards, different things like that. And so I think it's definitely worth mentioning them and honoring them right now.
Yeah, some big names, and of course, you know, maybe it's the sign of the times that I'm getting older, but I see a lot of young troopers like yourself, and it's, you know, it's people taking over the guard and doing different things, but it's a tough job out there, isn't it?
It's a little bit, especially certain climate and stuff right now. But it's what we're all out there just help serve people. In fact, on the way to come do an interview here, I was make sure I got here on time, but there was a vehicle with a flat tire. So I am a state trooper,
Yeah.
and our goal is to help serve the public. And so I had to hurry up and stop, make sure he was good, he was taken care of, he had a spare, had a tow truck, whatever en route. But I mean, we're still at the heart, still a state trooper for service.
Well, I appreciate you coming, and appreciate you stopping. We don't mind you being late if you're helping
No,
people.
sorry.
There's no doubt about that. Now, I want to wish you and your family a happy Thanksgiving,
Same
and
to
hope
you.
y'all have a great one, and don't eat too much turkey and tryptophan, you know?
I know the uniform's already getting a little tight, but no, we'll work on it, make sure it doesn't get worse.
All right, Trooper Brennan, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
problem.
All right, look, you can do your part out there. We've had 11 fatalities in a little over a week. Let's keep it there. Don't make it 12, 13, 14. Do your job. Listen to Trooper Brennan. Heed the warning. We'll be back with a lot more.